After dinner, my grandson cupped his hands to my ear and told me the plan for my life that I hadn't agreed to. "Mom says you're going to a nursing home," he whispered, eyes wide like he was confessing a crime. The oven timer dinged behind us, but all I heard was the rush of blood in my ears. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. The house smelled of baked meatloaf and dish soap. My daughter, Paige, was stacking plates. Her husband, Mark, swiping through his phone as if dinner were just another business call. When I asked, "What's this about a nursing home?" Paige laughed that realtor's laugh, smooth, polite, meant for clients, not fathers. "Oh, Dad, he must have overheard us talking about future care options." "Nothing's decided," she said, drying her hands too fast. But when I looked at the counter, under the fruit bowl, there was a glossy brochure, Magnolia Oaks Assisted Living. In small print at the bottom, deposit, due December 5th, $9,000 non-refundable. I felt something tighten in my chest. The kind of ache that isn't age, it's realization. Mark cleared his throat. "You know, Dad, houses this size can be a lot to manage. Market strong. Could set you up real comfortable." I looked around my dining room, the wood panels Ellen and I varnished together in '95. Every nail in this place was a memory. "I'm comfortable now," I said. He smiled like I'd missed the point. When they left, Paige kissed my cheek and said, "Try not to worry. We just want what's best." Their car lights vanished down the drive, leaving the porch in amber quiet. I stood there until the night insects started their songs. Then I went back inside, opened the brochure, and felt my stomach drop. Behind it, folded once, was a home staging estimate. Total, $4,200 due the December 3rd. A yellow sticky note clung to the corner. "Cash buyer ready, close by deck 20. My name wasn't on it anywhere. That was when the air changed. I could feel it. The line between family and transaction thinning by the minute. I pulled the framed deed off the wall above the fireplace. Satisfied 2009, stamped clean. I set it on the table beside a tax receipt, $6,112 paid in full for 2024. Proof that this house wasn't theirs to move, stage, or sell. It was my pension in brick and wood. I walked the hallway, touched every doorframe, ran my hand along the banister Ellen had painted sea blue because plain wood feels lonely. The fridge hummed. The porch clock ticked 2:11 a.m. I sat at the kitchen table, opened my old maintenance ledger, and wrote one line under today's date. Nov 24, dinner with family. Something's off. Sleep never came that night. But resolve did. Nobody moves me like furniture. Morning felt like walking through wet wool. I stood in the kitchen with the smell of last night's meatloaf still clinging to the air and couldn't taste my coffee. I stared at the Magnolia Oaks brochure on the counter and the staging estimate, $40,200 due December 3rd, like they might evaporate if I blinked hard enough. I didn't blink. I just listened to the refrigerator drone and my own pulse tapping inside my ears. I set the mug down and reached for my truck keys. The hook by the back door was empty, and for a breath I panicked, then found them sitting exactly where they always are, in the blue ceramic bowl Ellen bought at the Charleston City Market. The small, stupid relief felt like proof I wasn't slipping. I wasn't losing things. I was losing patience. At 10:30 a.m., my phone lit up with Paige's name. I put it on speaker and laid it on the table beside the deed so I could look at something solid while she talked. "Dad, you seemed overwhelmed last night," she began, voice soft like she was smoothing a wrinkle. "We're only thinking ahead. Magnolia Oaks is lovely. They do everything for you, meals, medication, housekeeping. I cook. I take my own pills," I said. "And the housekeeping is a broom in 30 minutes. She laughed once, polite. "Well, we just don't want you burdened, that's all. Mark thinks if we move quickly, we could get you a nice cushion." There was that word again. Cushion. I touched the tax receipt, $6,412, paid June 14th, 2024, Charleston County Treasury, and pressed my thumb over the stamp until the paper warmed. I'm cushioned, I said. I'm at home. After we hung up, the house felt too quiet. The quiet didn't soothe, it accused. I pulled the red accordion file from the hall closet and spread it open on the table. Deed, tax, bank, maintenance. My handwriting crawled across the maintenance ledger in ballpoint. Oil the porch swing. Replace the dryer belt. Clean gutters before hurricane season. If I could keep gutters clear, I could keep a life clear. By noon, I couldn't sit anymore. I walked 2 doors down to Mrs. Alvarez's porch. She was in her old white nurse's cardigan, shelling peas into a metal bowl that pinged every time one fell in. "You look pale, Mr. Hale," she said, then patted the seat beside her. She didn't fuss, didn't dramatize. She just listened while I told her about Eli's whisper, the brochure, the staging bill, the sticky note that read, "Cash buyer, close by deck 20. When I ran out of words, she put 2 fingers lightly on my wrist, the way you check a newborn's pulse. "Steady," she said. "They're rushing you, not rescuing you." She went inside and came back with a yellow legal pad and a black pen. "Dates," she said. "Write them like vital signs. If it's not written, it didn't happen." So I wrote, "Son, Nov, 24, dinner." Whisper, "Mom says nursing home." Found brochure. Staging estimate $4,200 due deck 3. Sticky note. Cash buyer. Close by deck 20. Then another line. Mon. Nov 25. Call from page. Cushion. I underlined cushion twice until the pen cut a groove. At 2:07 p.m., my landline rang. A cheerful voice chirped, "Hi, this is Kendra from Magnolia Oaks. I'm calling to go over the reservation details and the deposit schedule." I put the call on speaker, pressed the legal pad flat with my palm. "What reservation?" I asked. "Your daughter, Paige, asked us to hold a room. Our dogwood wing, very bright. We just need the $9,000 deposit by Thursday, December 5th, and then we'll schedule your intake interview. It's non-refundable after 48 hours, but we're flexible during the holidays." I stared at the dent my pen had gouged under cushion. "Cancel the hold," I said, a pause. Paper rustled on her end. "Oh, well, your daughter was quite sure. We can keep it until Friday if that's easier." "Cancel the hold," I repeated, and wrote 2:07 p.m. Kendra, Magnolia Oaks, tried to secure $9,000 deposit by Dece 5. I declined. I circled declined until the circle looked like a target. I hung up and felt the first real drop in my stomach, like the floor had tilted. It wasn't just talk at dinner. Pages had been set in motion without me. Money aimed like a hose toward a place I never consented to live. I walked to the sink and turned on the tap, let the cold run until the pipe stopped coughing. I splashed my face and watched the water drip off my chin into Ellen's measure twice, cut once mug. The phrase had always been a joke between us. Now it felt like instruction. At 3:10 p.m., I dialed my primary care physician's office. "I'd like a cognitive evaluation," I said, and listened to the receptionist shuffle the week. "Friday, November 29th, 9:40, she said. "We'll do a full assessment and print a letter." I said, "Please note that I requested this myself." She chuckled. Duly noted. By late afternoon, the fog felt thinner but heavier, like a blanket wet from rain. I took a slow lap of the house. The living room windows looked out over the marsh where the reeds browned this time of year. I found myself counting the things that made my life mine. The banister Ellen painted sea blue, the gouge on the dining table where I dropped a vise in 2003, the 3 keys to the front door, one on my ring, one Paige kept, one with Mrs. Alvarez. "Keys," I wrote on the legal pad. "Who has them?" Beneath that I wrote, "Locksmith? Price?" Ask Palmetto Hardware. At 5:42 p.m., my voicemail pinged. Mark's voice slid through like oil. Dad, listen, this is better for everyone. Place like Magnolia Oaks keeps you safe, and Paige and I can take the burden off your plate. The market is hot, he added, salesman bright. If we sign the assisted living paperwork by Friday, I can have a cash buyer lined up and a closing in 2 weeks. Don't complicate this. He hung up before I could find the words I wanted. I saved the message, not because I collect grievances, but because I collect proof. On the pad I wrote, voicemail, Mark, 5:42 p.m. Sign by Friday. 2-week close. I didn't need a file name or audio clip. I needed the smell of it. The rush, the pressure, the convenient calendar. Night came fast, the way it does in late November. I ate leftovers at the counter, not because I was hungry, but because chewing felt like the only way to keep my jaw from locking. When the porch clock clicked past 9, I took the Magnolia Oaks brochure and slid it into the Health tab of the accordion file, then placed the staging estimate in Home, right behind the deed. I tucked the legal pad on top like a lid. At 9:40, the phone glowed again. A text from Paige. You changed the locks? I hadn't yet, but the words felt like a dare. I put the phone face down and looked out at the dark yard, the way the moon silvered the camellias. My house was not a listing. My life was not a project. I pulled the maintenance ledger close and wrote one more line under today's entries. If they measure me like a property, I'll measure back. Then I underlined Friday, Novi 29, Doctor and Deck 5, Deposit and Deck 12. I didn't know what December 12 would be yet. Only that by then I'd have more than anger. I'd have paper. Tomorrow, I told myself, I would start a plan. Tonight, I let the quiet sit with me, and for the first time all day the quiet didn't accuse. It promised. Tuesday dawned gray and salt-heavy, the kind of Charleston morning that feels like the ocean is breathing through the windows. I woke before the sun, the yellow legal pad still on the nightstand where I'd left it. Eli's words echoed through the house like a half-remembered dream. Mom says you're going to a nursing home. I sat up, rubbed my temples, and told myself one thing. I wasn't losing my mind. I was losing my patience. At 8:15 a.m., I dialed Dr. Coleman's office. I'd like to confirm my cognitive evaluation, I said, making sure my voice didn't waver. Friday, November 29th, 9:40. The receptionist said, Got you down, Mr. Hale. Anything else? I hesitated. Please note, it's at my request. She chuckled. Duly noted. I wanted the record to start right there. Initiated by me, not them. After breakfast, I opened my laptop and typed Elder Law Charleston into the search bar. The second result read Redding and Pike, Protecting Families with Dignity. Since 1981, I called the number, and within minutes I was speaking to a man whose voice sounded like courtroom oak. Measured. Solid. Bring what you have, Mr. Redding said. Paper talks. By 3:15 that afternoon, I was in his office on Broad Street, surrounded by framed bar certificates and the faint smell of leather-bound law books. I laid out my life on his mahogany desk. The 2009 deed, my 2024 tax receipt, the staging invoice I'd found under the fruit bowl, and the Magnolia Oaks brochure with its $9,000 deposit note. He listened without interrupting, just underlining words with a fountain pen. Due date, deposit, staging, closing. When I finished, he looked me in the eye. Do you have your house keys? 3, I said. 1 for me, 1 Paige keeps, 1 with my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez. He nodded. Change the locks. Today. He explained what they were likely doing. A quiet power of attorney filing. Maybe a guardianship suggestion built on the story of my supposed decline. They'll claim you're unsafe alone. All they need is 1 sympathetic notary and a stack of forms. But you have something stronger than panic. You have paper. He drafted a revocation of any prior power of attorney right there and stamped it draft. Filed December 3rd. "This is the firewall," he said. "We'll send it certified mail when we're ready. Meanwhile, start documenting everything. Phone calls, texts, visits. I'll build the legal scaffolding. You build the record." Before leaving, he slid a thin card across the desk. "If you sense pressure, call me first, not them." I nodded, pocketed the card, and walked out into the amber dusk of Broad Street. On my way home, I stopped at Palmetto Hardware, where the clerk, kid named Seth, maybe 19, helped me choose Schlage deadbolts. "Good choice," he said, scanning the box. "Tough to pick." The receipt read $179.42, time-stamped 6:47 p.m., and I folded it into my wallet behind the tax receipt. Paper against paper, layered protection. As I pulled into the driveway, Mrs. Alvarez was watering her camellias. "They came by earlier," she said. "Your daughter and her husband? I didn't open the gate." She lowered her voice. "You might need this." She held up her old digital recorder, one she used back when she managed her clinic. "If they bring documents, set it on the table. Let their words trap themselves." That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the red accordion file spread open like a battle map. I labeled new tabs: deed, tax, health, emails, calls, locks. I tucked the hardware receipt into the locks tab and scribbled the date beside it. Then I opened a fresh page on the legal pad. Nov 26, consulted Redding and Pike. Plan formed. Locks next. The house creaked, the way old wood does when it's deciding whether to rest or stand guard. I touched Ellen's framed photo on the mantel and whispered, "They think they can move me like furniture." The photo caught the lamplight, and for a second, her smile looked approving. At 10:22 p.m., I sat down one last time and wrote underlined in block letters. Step 1, proof. Step 2, locks. Step 3, paper trail. Then I closed the pad, placed it atop the accordion file, and turned off the light. Tomorrow, I would stop reacting. Tomorrow, I would start documenting. Wednesday morning, Paige texted, "Coffee? 11:30 at Driftwood Cafe?" The air in my chest tightened the way it does before a drill bit bites wood. I told myself it was a meeting between a father and daughter. I told myself I could handle it. What I didn't tell myself was that she'd brought more than good intentions. I put the little digital recorder Mrs. Alvarez had given me in the inside pocket of my jacket and tucked my phone into my palm, face down so they wouldn't see. The cafe smelled of espresso and warm sugar. The bell over the door chimed like a tiny annunciator. Paige arrived in a blouse sharp enough to cut paper and sat with that practiced softness that realtors keep polished for strangers. Mark arrived 5 minutes later, hands in his pockets, smile lubricated by caffeine. Behind them, a man in a navy vest followed, polite, bland, a notary with a stack of blank forms tucked under his arm like a magician hiding cards. "We just need a few things signed to make this easier," Paige said, setting a slim folder on the table as if it contained a brochure. The top sheet read, "Durable Power of Attorney." Under it, smaller print I didn't like said, "Immediate activation upon signature." The notary slid his pen out like he'd done this before. His hands were steady. "Let me read it," I said. My voice sounded ordinary to my ears, but I felt an old tempo shift, like a band catching a new rhythm. I reached for the folder and guided it toward me. "Today would be best," Mark said. "The buyer's ready. 2 weeks and we close. It's all paperwork. We can get it done, and you'll be set." He smiled at me the way a man smiles at an investment. Something about the notary made me uneasy. He kept looking at his phone. He said, "We have to notarize now. I'm on a run." There were blank lines in his little leather log when I stole a glance. The whole place smelled faintly of lemon and rubbing alcohol. I set the recorder, face down under my napkin. The little red light was nearly invisible. I read the first paragraph aloud and felt the words slide into my bones. This durable power of attorney grants the agent authority to manage finances, to execute property transactions, and to make arrangements for long-term care. I folded the page at my thumb for the judge of my mind. "I don't sign things I don't understand," I said. Page's voice leaned in, all soft Velcro. "Dad, it's standard. Mark can handle the banking stuff so you don't have to worry. Think of it as a convenience." She reached for my hand and patted it, like she used to when I'd carved a wrong angle on a birdhouse, and she wanted me calm. That's when Mark's phone rang on speaker. He put it on the table, call volume, so the room could hear. "This is the buyer. They've got cash. 2 weeks, tops," he said. The buyer's voice was muffled. Someone said, "We'll lose leverage if he drags this out." Mark laughed, then said to me, "See? They're ready. Sign today, and it all moves smooth." I excused myself to the restroom, heartbeat in my throat. In the stall, my hands shook, but not from fear, only from adrenaline. I took photos of the forms through the camera on my phone, careful to capture the notary's little leather log, the blank lines, the notary's card that listed years and no specific client timestamps. I took a photo of the top of the folder where "Durable Power of Attorney" sat in heavy print, and the line that read, "Immediate activation upon signature." Back at the table, I set the folder down and said, "I need time to think." The notary's smile thinned. "We can do the signing now and you can review the copies later," he offered, as if copies might later contain the same truth. I let him keep smiling. I let Paige keep cooing. I folded the bill for my coffee and put it on the saucer. I wrote one word on the back of my napkin and slid it into my pocket. Email. At 1:05 p.m., I was home with the folder under my arm and the little red light of the recorder glowing faint in my pocket. The recorder contained more than a machine's memory. It contained the cadence of their persuasion. I uploaded the photos to my email. Subject: "They brought a POA, see attached," and sent them to Mr. Redding at 1:22 p.m. The reply came in 5 minutes. "Do not sign anything." "Keep the recorder," he wrote. "If they push again, have them sign in front of me. Don't be alone." His punctuation felt like armor. That night, after dusk, I changed the locks. The deadbolt box from Palmetto Hardware sat on the kitchen table with the receipt folded beneath it. $179.42, 6:47 p.m. I worked by the porch light, hands steady. The Schlage lock clicked into place, like the final tooth of a gear. I put the old key in a small envelope and sealed it. Wrote, "Old key, do not use on the front," and handed a copy of the receipt to Mrs. Alvarez the next day for safekeeping. She tucked it into her Bible and gave me a look that said, "That's a good man's move." I called Paige and texted gently, "I lost a key. I changed the locks. Call me." Her reply was immediate. "Why would you change the locks? We're family." I didn't answer. I let the message sit like an accusation. In the week that followed, I started a breadcrumb trail. Scans of the POA pages I'd photographed, copies of the notary's business card, the Palmetto Hardware receipt tucked under locks in the accordion file, the little recorder's audio exported and labeled in a folder I called Cafe POA. I'd run Van 27. I didn't make a spectacle of it. I made a record. Paper is slow, but it is faithful. At night, I sat at the kitchen table and listened back to the recording. Paige's voice was velvet and precise. Mark's was syrupy with promise. The notary's voice had that neutral ring that papers try to give themselves. In the audio, I could hear Mark saying, plain as a bell, "We've got a cash buyer waiting. Only needs 2 weeks." I pressed my thumb into the margin of the napkin where I'd written email and felt the groove of ink. I slept less, planned more, and let each act of theirs be answered not with heat, but with evidence. Tomorrow would be Thanksgiving, and the house would be full with plates and people. They'd test me with their smiles and their small talk. They would think that the change of locks was the end of it. They were wrong. Thanksgiving came in gray light and silence. While other houses steamed with gravy and laughter, mine smelled of Windex and tension. At 9:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. "You changed the locks?" Page again, sharp, clipped. I typed back one word, "Yes," and left it there. The reply bubbles danced for a full minute before disappearing. At 2 p.m., the landline rang. A bright voice announced, "Hi, this is Kendra from Magnolia Oaks. Just confirming your $9,000 deposit due December 5th. I pressed the phone to my chest, then back to my ear. "Cancel the hold," I said. "Oh, your daughter already. Cancel it." I wrote it down on the yellow pad. 2:07 p.m. Kendra called. "Tried to secure deposit." I declined. The act of writing steadied my pulse. Paper didn't tremble. People did. Friday, November 29th, I drove across the Ashley River to Dr. Coleman's office for my cognitive assessment. The waiting room smelled of disinfectant and peppermint. When my name was called, I followed her into a small exam room where she handed me a clipboard. 3 words, she said. Apple, penny, bridge. I repeated them, drew the clock, counted backward by 7s. When it was over, she smiled. "You're fine, Mr. Hale. Better than fine. You're oriented. Memory intact. I'll print the letter right now." The paper came warm from the printer. Evaluation date, 11/29/24. Patient demonstrates full capacity for independent decision-making. I folded it neatly, slid it into the Health tab of my accordion file, and wrote one line beneath. Doctor letter. Proof of mind. Sunday evening, December 1st, I stepped outside with a flashlight to check the gutters. Something metallic caught the beam near the back gate. A realtor's lockbox, zip tied to the latch like a badge of possession. I took a photo with the timestamp and pried it loose. Inside was a single brass key, tagged front door. I stood there under the cold glow of the porch light, the crickets gone quiet, and realized they hadn't just planned this. They'd already started showing the place. I called Redding first thing Monday. "They've attached a lockbox to my gate," I said. He exhaled through his nose. "They're treating you like inventory." By 10 a.m., he'd filed certified revocations of any power of attorney and a notice of no trespass to both of them. "Stay calm," he told me. "They'll escalate before they retreat." At 5:42 p.m., another voicemail from Mark arrived, smooth and rehearsed. "Dad, you're making this harder than it needs to be. The market's hot. This is better for everyone. Sign the assisted living paperwork by Friday, and we'll handle the rest. Don't complicate this." His voice cracked just before complicate. I saved the message and jotted it down. Mark, 5:42 p.m. Pressure call. That night I went room to room turning on lamps, one by one, until the house glowed like it was holding court. Each bulb felt like a witness. I placed the doctor's letter, the photo of the lockbox, and Mark's voicemail transcript on the kitchen table in a neat row. Evidence had a rhythm now. Call, copy, label, secure. Before bed, I walked the perimeter once more. The December wind smelled of salt and smoke from someone's distant turkey fryer. I thought of Ellen, of how she'd tap my shoulder when I doubted myself and say, "Measure twice, cut once." I whispered it to the dark yard and locked the door behind me. They thought I'd grow tired, confused, compliant. Instead, I was sharpening. Monday, December 2nd, began with a cold drizzle that slicked Broad Street like glass. I buttoned my coat and drove downtown to meet Redding at First Citizens Bank. Inside, the teller windows gleamed under fluorescent light. The air smelled of ink and antiseptic. At 10:18 a.m. sharp, we sat across from the branch manager while Redding spoke in that calm, court-trained rhythm. Place a fraud watch on all outgoing wires exceeding $5,000 from Mr. Hale's account. Require his in-person approval. The manager nodded, stamped 2 forms, and slid a carbon copy my way. I signed slowly, savoring the sound of the pen scratching paper. Next, we walked 2 blocks to the courthouse. By 11:40 a.m., a clerk in blue nails and reading glasses accepted our petition for review of any proposed guardianship or POA. It wasn't an attack. It was insurance. If they try to file, the judge sees your doctor's letter first, Redding said. He pressed the copy flat on the counter, his palm firm. Sunlight, Mr. Hale. That's all this is. When I pulled into my driveway just before noon, Mrs. Alvarez was waiting on her porch, her phone in hand. They came at 11, she said. You'll want to see this. On her screen, Paige and Mark at my back gate, jiggling the new lock, whispering in the clipped tones of schemers caught off guard. Mark said, "Call the stager back. We'll lose the buyer's leverage if Dad digs in." Paige hissed. He changed the locks. We'll need a locksmith. The timestamp read 11:06 a.m. She airdropped me the video, then placed a gentle hand on my sleeve. They're getting desperate, she said. I thanked her, saved the clip, and wrote the entry. Deck 2, 11:06 a.m. Video evidence. Neighbor witness. That evening, I spread every document across the dining table like a war map. In the center, the deed, Dr. Coleman's letter, bank fraud watch confirmation, video file, staging invoice, Magnolia Oaks brochure, Mark's voicemail transcript. My red accordion file bulged like a shield ready for battle. I rehearsed answers to questions no one had yet asked. Yes, Your Honor, I changed the locks for safety. Yes, doctor's letter dated November 29th. Independent capacity confirmed. At 7:23 p.m., the phone rang again. I let the machine catch it. Paige's voice was soft, brittle. Dad, you're being stubborn. We're trying to help you. You can't live alone forever. She paused, sighing the way people sigh before they twist a knife. Don't make this ugly. I watched the recorder's red light blink on the table. One slow pulse, like a heartbeat. The house hummed with refrigerator noise and the faint tick of the porch clock. I looked around at the photographs on the wall. Ellen's laughter frozen in a frame. Eli's crayon drawing of our house with a sun so big it touched the roof. They think they're saving me, I whispered to no one. I'm saving the house. Before bed, I placed the video file on a small USB drive labeled Deck 2 Evidence and slid it into an envelope with Redding's card. On the front, I wrote, "Deliver if I'm pressured again." Then, I set the envelope inside my metal toolbox, the one I'd had since 1971, closed the lid, and turned the latch. Tomorrow, I'd walk into that courthouse and face them. They thought they were coming to move me out. I was coming to move them off the board. Thursday, December 12th, 9 a.m., Charleston County Courthouse. Room 3B. The air in there smelled of old paper and furniture polish, the kind of smell that clings to places where truth and lies trade seats. I sat on the left side, my red accordion file on my lap like a loyal dog. Redding sat beside me, flipping through the evidence with the calm of a man who'd already measured twice before cutting once. Across the aisle, Paige wore a gray blazer too formal for mourning, her hair pinned so tight it looked painful. Mark sat next to her, his watch glinting each time he shifted. The notary from the cafe was behind them, pale and sweating. They looked less like family and more like a sales team ready to pitch a reluctant client. When the judge entered, Paige straightened and put on her best daughter's voice. "Your Honor," she began, "my father has been confused lately. He loses track of things. He gets paranoid. We're only trying to make sure he's safe and cared for." She dabbed her eye with a tissue that stayed dry. "We love him. We just want what's best." I stared at the back of my hands. They weren't shaking. Not anymore. When it was our turn, Redding didn't raise his voice. He simply stood and began laying documents one after another on the bench like a carpenter setting his tools. "Exhibit A," he said, holding up a sheet. Dr. Coleman's cognitive evaluation, dated November 29th. Mr. Hale demonstrates full mental capacity and independence. The judge nodded. Exhibit B, property tax receipts for the last decade, each paid on time, in person. Another nod. He moved to the next. Exhibit C, bank statement from First Citizens Bank, account flagged for fraud protection at Mr. Hale's request. December 2nd and 10:18 a.m. Exhibits D and E, video evidence showing the petitioner's attempting unauthorized entry to his property on December 2nd at 11:06 a.m. and an audio recording of Mr. and Mrs. Langley, also known as Mark and Paige, pressuring Mr. Hale to sign a power of attorney on November 27th, witnessed by a notary whose log shows blank entries for that day. The judge raised an eyebrow. Blank entries? Redding nodded. The notary's book lists no appointment for that hour. Yet he appeared at a cafe with pre-filled forms. He claims urgency at the family's request. The notary swallowed hard, sweat tracing a path down his temple. They said it was a formality, he muttered. Exhibit F, Redding continued, is a staging invoice dated before any discussion of care or consent, and a Magnolia Oaks brochure noting a $9,000 deposit due December 5th, also initiated without Mr. Hale's approval. Paige's face began to crumble. Mark leaned in and whispered something sharp. The judge turned to me. Mr. Hale, do you wish to remain in your home? I rose slowly, feeling the grain of the wood under my palm as I steadied myself. Your Honor, I said, I've built every inch of that house with my own hands. My wife and I made our life there. It's paid for, maintained, safe. I mow the yard, fix the wiring, pay the bills. My daughter mistook my patience for confusion. I don't need rescuing. I need them to stop trying to sell my life. For a moment, the courtroom went still. Even the clock on the back wall seemed to hesitate. Redding placed one last item on the bench, a maintenance ledger, pages creased from years of use. Your Honor, this is his record. Every repair, every replacement, every date. The handwriting is steady throughout. The judge flipped to the last entry. Nov 24. Dinner with family. Something's off. He closed the book gently. Something was, he said. Then he looked at Paige. Mrs. Langley, do you have any proof your father is unfit to manage his affairs? Paige's lips parted, but no sound came. Mark shifted, tapping his watch against the table. The notary stared at the floor. The judge leaned forward. This court finds no evidence of incapacity. The power of attorney drafted on November 27th is hereby void. All proposed property transactions are frozen pending Mr. Hale's consent. Petition denied. The gavel didn't strike hard. It landed like a door closing softly. Still final, Paige turned red. Mark muttered something about ridiculous favoritism. The judge looked at them both. You're lucky he's patient, he said. If this were fraud, you'd be facing more than embarrassment. Outside the courtroom, reporters weren't waiting. No one applauded. Justice in the real world rarely echoes. But as we stepped into the hallway, sunlight broke through the glass ceiling and lit the floor between us. Redding handed me a copy of the ruling and said, You're free to go home, Mr. Hale, and this time, when you lock the door, keep it locked. I walked out into the winter light, breathing like a man who'd just finished a long swim. The courthouse doors swung closed behind me with a sound like freedom. Quiet, heavy, certain. Outside the courthouse, the December air cut clean through the tension that had been building for weeks. I stood on the granite steps, the stamped ruling paper trembling slightly in my hand. Not from fear, but from release. Petition denied. 2 words that restored my name, my home, and my peace. Mark's voice hissed behind me before I could take a breath. You just cost us a commission, old man. I turned. His jaw was tight, His pride cracked open like a bad window pane. "No, Mark," I said quietly. "I cost you the illusion that I'm a paycheck." Paige stood beside him, mascara smudged, mouth trembling but still defiant. "We were trying to help," she said. "Help yourself, maybe," I replied. "But not to my house." Redding stepped forward, his calm like a brick wall between us. "We're done here," he said firmly. He led me down the courthouse steps while they stood frozen on the landing, realizing that for the first time I wasn't the one being handled. That afternoon, we filed follow-up motions. Redding sent a bar complaint against the notary. Predatory behavior toward an elder without verification of consent. It wasn't vengeance. It was cleanup. He also prepared cease and desist letters to both the home stager and the so-called pre-market buyer. The letters were precise, each sentence folded sharp as origami. Within 48 hours, both companies responded by email. We were misinformed about ownership. We apologize for any confusion. On December 15th, Magnolia Oaks left me a voicemail dripping with politeness. "Mr. Hale, we wanted to clarify that your reservation has been canceled and no deposit will be processed." I saved it too, not because I needed it, but because it felt good to own every detail. I installed a doorbell camera, 129ers, bought cash at Palmetto Hardware. The same kid who sold me the locks gave me a little nod. "Everything holding up okay, Mr. Hale?" he asked. "Better than ever," I said, and meant it. Mrs. Alvarez came over that evening with a covered dish, macaroni casserole, her cure for all wounds. "Justice smells like baked cheese," she joked, setting it on my counter. Then she handed me a small flash drive. "The video's on here, plus a copy in the cloud, just in case." I smiled. "You're better than a lawyer," she patted my shoulder. "No, just a nurse who knows when someone's pulse is steady again." That night, I lit a single lamp in the kitchen and placed every document back into the red accordion file. Then I labeled it, in my own handwriting, "Case Closed, December 12, 2024. Below that, I wrote, "Outcome, Justice Delivered. Cost, Peace Restored." Saturday morning, the mail brought a check from Redding and Pike, the remainder of my retainer. In the memo line it read, "Unused balance, $327.50. Lawyers don't refund unless things end right." I spent that day doing something I hadn't done in months, sanding the banister Ellen once painted sea blue. The grain came alive under the paper, soft and smooth like breath. When I finished, I polished the brass plate on the doorframe where her name was etched beside mine. The house didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt inhabited again. That evening, Eli came running up the driveway, cheeks red from cold. "Grandpa! Mom said you're okay now." I knelt and smiled. "I was always okay, buddy. Just had to prove it." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. Another one of his drawings. This time it was me on the porch, holding a big check mark over the house. He'd written, in shaky crayon letters, "Grandpa stayed home." I hung it right next to Ellen's picture. That night, for the first time in weeks, I didn't keep the lights burning. I didn't check the locks twice. I just turned off the lamp, let the darkness settle where it belonged, and slept the deep, dreamless sleep of someone who had finally reclaimed his place in the world. Justice didn't arrive with fanfare. It came in envelopes and emails, in quiet confirmations that the world had noticed what they'd done. A week after the hearing, Redding called while I was mending a chair in my workshop. His voice carried that same dry steadiness. "You'll be happy to know the notary admitted wrongdoing," he said. "He'll keep his license, but under probation. Required elder law ethics course, 6 months oversight." I chuckled. "That's a start." He wasn't finished. "Also, the local realtor board opened a conflict of interest investigation. It's about Paige listing property she didn't legally control. She'll be asked to step away from listings for 60 days pending review." I leaned against the workbench, staring at the beam of morning light slanting through the dusty window. "She won't like that." "No," he said, "but maybe she'll learn something about honesty." Later that afternoon, Mark got his turn. His brokerage sent him a compliance audit after Redding forwarded the court transcript. Word spread fast in a small market. Agents don't forget the smell of a scandal. By week's end, Mark's tone in his emails shifted from defiant to apologetic. He wrote one line that almost sounded human. "Didn't mean to push you so hard, sir. I thought it'd be easier if you let us handle things." I didn't reply. Some lessons don't need applause. I turned my focus to rebuilding, not revenge. My old red accordion file became a new green binder, each tab labeled with the patience I'd earned. Home, health, finance, contacts, orders. Every page a reminder that self-respect is paperwork backed by backbone. On December 20th, the day they once circled as my eviction date, I woke before dawn, made coffee, and opened the front door. The marsh beyond the yard shimmered silver under the rising sun. I breathed deep, the air sharp and sweet with winter. The phone rang. It was Eli. "Grandpa, are you still in your house?" he asked, voice full of the earnest wonder only a 7-year-old can have. "I am," I said, smiling, "and it's still mine." "Good," he said, relieved. "Mom said you'd be mad forever." "I'm not mad," I told him. "I'm just awake now." When we hung up, I stood in the doorway a long time, listening to the distant hum of a world that kept spinning. The wind rattled the live oak leaves. A heron flew low over the water. I thought about Ellen, how she used to stand there with her hands in her apron pockets, saying the same thing every morning. Still ours, still standing. That afternoon, I went into town for groceries. People greeted me differently. The bank teller smiled wider. Even the clerk at Palmetto Hardware waved. Small towns have short gossip lines. Apparently, everyone knew. Justice wasn't loud, but it had traveled. Back home, I brewed another pot of coffee and sat by the window. The mug Ellen once painted with measured twice, cut once, warmed my palms. I looked at the green binder on the table, evidence of order restored, and realized something simple. Justice isn't about winning. It's about staying whole. That night, I wrote one last note in my ledger. Deck 20. They wanted me gone. I stayed. The house is quiet again. Then, beneath it, I added an aphorism that came to me as easily as breath. Justice isn't noise. It's the silence that returns when the storm has passed. The porch clock ticked in agreement. In the weeks that followed, I learned that peace isn't something you stumble back into. It's something you rebuild nail by nail, like repairing a porch after a storm. The house had stopped feeling haunted by betrayal. Now it hummed again, old floorboards creaking, pipes groaning, the smell of fresh varnish rising from the banister Ellen once painted blue. I spent mornings with coffee and quiet, afternoons in the workshop shaping scraps of oak into new frames. The sound of sandpaper against wood was steadier than prayer. With each stroke, the anger that had lived under my ribs softened into something simpler. Gratitude that I'd caught it in time. Some nights, I'd pull out the yellow legal pad that started it all, dates, times, names, and run my fingers down the list. What had begun as panic was now proof that clarity has a paper trail. I tore the first few pages loose and burned them in the sink, watching the ink curl into gray smoke. The rest I kept, neat and intact, because lessons deserve to live longer than anger. I started writing again, letters I never mailed. One to Paige, telling her I remembered the little girl who built birdhouses with me in the yard. One to Mark, explaining that success isn't measured in commissions but in conscience. And one to Eli, sealed and tucked in my desk for a day far in the future. It said, "Never let anyone sell you on what's best for you if you're the one paying the price, each." Letter was a form of sanding, taking, down the rough edges, until I could run a hand over the past without cutting myself. At church the following Sunday, I tacked a small note on the community board next to the bake sale flyer. It read, "For men my age, get a doctor's letter, consult an elder law attorney, keep your locks current, and make 3 copies of everything. Signed, Henry Hale." By Tuesday, 3 calls came. One from a retired firefighter, another from a widower who'd heard whispers of his daughter helping with finances, and a third from a man who said, "I thought I was the only one." We met for coffee that week. 4 old men comparing scars in the form of paperwork. I told them about the locks, the stager's invoice, the bank freeze, the courtroom calm. They nodded, eyes sharp with recognition. When I finished, I quoted Ellen, "Measure twice, cut once." They laughed, and one said, "Guess we've all been cut before." That night, I walked the porch with a quiet heart. The December wind had turned mild. Lights from the marsh reflected off the water like embers. I thought of all the years I'd spent believing my age made me a burden, when in truth it made me a historian, a keeper of receipts, of memories, of warnings written in the margins of time. Before heading in, I looked up at the stars and whispered, "You didn't lose me, Ellen. I just needed to relearn how to stand." Inside, the house was warm, alive again. I turned off the lamp and let the night settle in peace, knowing the next chapter of my life would be written slower, but with clearer handwriting. January came soft and cold, the kind of Charleston winter that fools you into thinking the year's troubles have been washed away with the rain. I woke one morning to find a postcard wedged in my mailbox, half soaked from the dew. It had a stock photo on the front, a smiling woman with a headset, and the words, "We buy homes as is. Cash in hand." On the back, scrawled in hurried blue ink, someone had written, "Great terms for quick closing. Call Paige." The handwriting was hers. I stood there on the porch in my robe, the morning air nipping at my neck, and laughed. Not the bitter kind I'd known before, but the deep, exhausted kind that comes when irony finally sits down beside you and asks for coffee. They hadn't changed. Maybe they wouldn't. But I had. I slipped the card into my green binder under a new tab I'd added called Noise. Beneath it, I wrote in small letters, "File and forget." That evening, Eli came over for our weekly woodworking. His small hands held the edges of a dovetail joint while I guided the clamp. The wood clicked together with the satisfying precision that only patience can earn. "Grandpa," he said, brow furrowed, "will this house ever be mine?" I smiled at him, so earnest, so certain that ownership is only about names on paper. "No," I said, tightening the clamp, "but it'll always be the place where you learn to make things straight." He nodded, not quite understanding yet, and that was fine. After he fell asleep on the couch, I walked to the kitchen. The moonlight touched the countertop, gleaming off Ellen's old mug. Measure twice, cut once. I washed it, dried it, and turned the handle just so, facing forward under the cabinet lip. The house smelled faintly of sawdust and clean dishes, honest scents that didn't lie about anything. I sat at the table with my ledger, the same one that started on a shaky November night, when my grandson whispered a truth that broke everything open. I turned to the last page and wrote, "January 14th, postcard arrived. Paige still selling illusions. Eli learning what's real." Then, under that, the only line that still needed to be said, "You didn't lose me. You gave me away. And I took myself back." The porch clock ticked steady in the silence. The house no longer needed guarding. It simply needed living. Outside, the marsh wind brushed the siding with the gentlest of sounds, like an old friend tapping the door. I leaned back in my chair, closed the ledger, and let the quiet fill every corner of my home. It wasn't revenge that warmed me. It was peace, earned slow, lawful, and entirely mine. And as the night deepened, I realized that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just sits across from you in your own kitchen, smiling through the reflection in a clean cup of coffee.